I am Ray, and once you understand this, reality is going to change forever. Because this is going to save you years of headache. Something quite profound that I just learned recently, or at least am on the cutting edge. We're going to use the red marker today. I used to think that engaging in low frequency behavior, hopefully you can see that good. I used to think that this would result in bad karma. Now I'm not saying that it doesn't, but a new thought came to me just recently. But before I get to that, I have to provide a bit of context first, or else it's not going to make so much sense. Now everything is energy, and energy is frequency and vibration. And we all as humans have an overall frequency. This might be a combination of our thoughts, of our emotions, of our actions. And the higher frequency we go, the more we strive toward heaven. And the lower frequency we go, the more we strive toward hell. You can also look at it as life and death. And whatever frequency our overall vibration is, will determine where we are on this spectrum. Are you closer to heaven? Are you closer to hell? And you know where you are simply by understanding the definition of heaven and hell. You don't need to be religious. You know that heaven is the best possible experience for the longest amount of time, and hell is the worst possible experience for the longest amount of time. So, the more you suffer on a daily basis means the lower frequency you are. And so too, the more joy, the more love, peace, gratitude you experience, the closer you are to heaven and the higher frequency you are. As it is said, your frequency is what you frequently see. So do you see the world as evil, terrible place? Or do you see the world as beautiful? Now another way of looking at this, frequency and time. We can do this again, heaven. So imagine if this was your potential. The higher up you are, the more potential you actualize. Let's do this. Now imagine these lines as timelines. Right now, in the present moment, there are an infinite array of different realities. Infinite potential, meaning there are an infinite array of different realities in which you are currently living. But they exist as potential. So for instance, there is a version of you right now who is living their worst life. You experience nothing but suffering. And there's a version of you who is living their best life. Everything you could ever dream of. Now what you might imagine is that these timelines are like radio stations. And the songs that are played on that radio station are your experiences. So if you're tuned into hell radio, all the songs on that radio are the songs you hate the most. And if you're tuned into heaven radio, they're all your favorite songs. But for most of us, we're somewhere in the middle. But we have the power in this present moment to shift to any reality we desire. Simply if we understood how. Well, you will soon know how. Think of your mind, for instance, like the dial on the radio. Your mind is what determines which station you tune to. What is the specific frequency of your desired reality? Now, for most people, it's the same. It's the frequency of love, of joy, of peace. So too, it is the same in the opposite direction. Suffering, shame, guilt, hatred, regret. The only difference is your particular experience will be unique to you. Now, I'll show you how to rise up, but first, let us return to my original point. I'm going to do this again. You see, I thought the low frequency behavior created the karma in which then I had to face and experience the consequences of. But here is my new suspicion. It's not that it was the consequences of my actions, but rather when I engaged in the low frequency behavior, my frequency dropped and I shifted downward to a lower frequency timeline, in which the consequences were already present. So instead of creating the consequences for myself, I simply shifted to a timeline in which there were more problems. There were more things that went wrong. There was more suffering. And you see, once you have an awakening experience, that also leads to enlightenment, because not all awakening experiences do. For those who are truly awakened, it's kind of it's not very classy to say that you are enlightened. I can't even spell enlightened. What happens is, for the enlightened ones, for the awakened ones, and you don't have to be fully enlightened, tell me I'm special. Please. They stop experiencing karma. You see, before my awakening experience, certain actions would create suffering for days and days and days. But once you are completely non-attached to your ego, the one who makes the karma, I found that no matter what happens, you bounce back like that. And so the karma, the consequences of your actions are greatly diminished. They don't really have a lasting effect. But what I'm beginning to see is that before, if I engaged in a low frequency behavior, I would get stuck on these lower timelines and I wouldn't be able to shift. And so I would continue to experience more and more suffering. Whereas now, I might experience one suffering and then shoot back up before having to face even more consequences. Now, how this works is quite, how would you say, common sense, perhaps? So let's just kind of do a bit of a comparison of how I used to be and how I experience things now from the awakened state. So if I made a mistake, for instance, there would be a strong attachment to that mistake, which would result in feelings of shame and guilt and fear, and all of these things continue to feed a negative vibration. It continues to bring you down. I guess a quick definition of ego. Ego is simply personal identity. It is the person you believe yourself to be. It is not your true nature. It is more like a mask, like the word persona, which means mask. But from the awakened state, you realize that you are not your ego. And so your mistakes are not as personal. From the awakened state, you realize that God is always in control. That there is nothing that happens to you in this life that was not given the okay by God. Not that God made it happen, but God allowed it to happen. Because God will not infringe upon free will. So individual egos, people, have to face the consequences of their actions, the things that they do, but also the demons. The demons also have free will, but we're not going to get into that. Instead of thinking that I made a mistake, I realized it was not a mistake. It was God providing me an opportunity. There was no problem. Only in the ego state, when we judge our experiences, when we judge ourselves, our actions, do we believe there is a problem? Do we believe there are mistakes? But from the awakened state, you realize that this is God's perfect universe, that there is nothing wrong. But how much different is that from the ego state? The ego thinks there's everything is wrong. That is because the ego's very nature is problematic, so all it sees is problems. So the first thing that happens is that you don't claim the mistake. Instead, you see, before we continue, I have to make a point. That is, the mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And you have the option to focus on what is negative, on what is neutral, or what is positive. Everything that you focus on that is negative will lower your frequency. And everything you focus on that is positive will raise your frequency up. And so, every single thing that you focus on in this life comes with a price. Every moment you're focusing on mistakes, you're also taking your attention away from the lesson to be learned. Every time you focus on a problem, you take your attention away from the opportunity. Every time you focus on what is wrong with the world, you take your attention away from what is right. Stop it. Every moment you ruminate on shame and guilt and fear. Oh, I'm such a bad person. Oh, I hate myself so much. Life is so terrible. Everything is so bad. It's going wrong. All of these imaginary evils in the future that will never happen unless you believe them into existence. Fear is just an illusion. Guilt and shame are useless because you cannot put a fire out by pouring more gasoline on top of it. Meaning, you cannot get yourself in a negative situation and want to fix it and want to be better while also focusing on your mistakes, on the problem, on the shame, on the guilt, on the fear. You might say with your lips that you want to fix the problem, but with your actions, you betray your words. If you find yourself in any negative situation in your life, any negative experiences, you must only focus on the things that serve you, because if you can rise to a higher frequency, a higher timeline, you can avoid all the extra problems, all the suffering that is awaiting for you on the lower timelines, the timelines that are closer to hell. You see, once you realize that God is in control, always has been, always will be, and everything is in God's divine will, you realize there are no mistakes. Now, we're only human, so there may still be feelings of shame or guilt that arise after we make a mistake. But when we remember, we have to remind ourselves, because we forget. God is in control, that everything is perfectly okay, that you are not off track, that you are exactly where you need to be for your highest spiritual growth. If you can keep that mentality in your head, you will continue to rise to higher and higher states of vibration and avoid years of suffering. And so, even if shame or guilt or fear arises, there is nothing that says you have to feed it. It is our resistance to these feelings that further feeds the negativity. It is our rumination on these things, which is all fueled by ego. Because think about the psychological drama that we all get into sometimes. We get caught in this mind storm of negative thoughts, and we ruminate on negativity. You see, the ego is always judging our experiences. The ego is always judging ourselves. The ego is always judging other people. The ego is also always ruminating on the past and worrying about the future. And it has an infinite array of different desires and things it wants to avoid. Now think about how terrible it is to live from ego. It is always judging that things are wrong, that life isn't going exactly the way it wants to. If you're always focusing on what you do not have, you shift to timelines in which you don't have it. Or you stay stuck on the timeline in which you do not have what you want. So the ego is complaining about not having what it wants, but it is the exact thing that is keeping it from what it wants. Think about judging our current experiences. Life is not happening the way I want it to be happening. And yet because it's focusing on all the things that are wrong, it stays stuck in those lower timelines. You always create more of what you focus on. Because, as we said, the mind is a one-pointed tool. But what does it do? The mind directs the flow of energy. And energy is the force of creation. Where attention goes, energy flows. So the entire quality of the life we create for ourselves is determined precisely by the things we focus our attention on. It is really as simple as having 2 buckets. 2 voting ballots. Trump and Kamala, whichever you like. One bucket serves to bring you down, the other serves to bring you up. And every day we cast our votes into these buckets by what we allow ourselves to focus on. If you had a balance, if you focus on 50% negative things and 50% positive things during the day, that's an F, my friend. 50 out of 100 fail at life. Hell for you. But as you start increasing this number, you stop tolerating all the negative garbage. 70%, now that's a C. Life is getting better. 80%, 90% even. Let me tell you something. There is not a single negative thought that passes my mind without my conscious awareness. And immediately, I get the whip. I run a tight ship, okay? And guess what? I feel at peace all the time. I'm always happy. I do not even know what a bad day is.
But you're gonna find out.
And so I say that if people only paid attention for one day, the thoughts that they think and the words that they speak, they would know exactly why their life is the way it is. It's obvious to everybody else, my friend, except for you. Because we have blind spots. Because we have ego. Ego is ignorance. Ego is illusion. But awareness is light. Awareness is truth. So be aware of where you allow your attention to drift. And you will begin changing your life. Now, you probably won't believe this, but you are already in heaven. You're only dreaming that you're not. Powerful stuff. This is what I like to say is God's cosmic joke on all of us. That is, how many of us since the beginning of time have spent our whole lives trying to find these things? You see, my friends, abundance, peace, love, joy is the default state. Any idea that you have to work or strive or try or struggle to get any of these things, it is ignorance. It is because you are trapped, a slave to the ego. You see, a lot of people talk about the matrix, but they don't realize that the matrix is not outside of you. The matrix is your own mind, because the mind creates the illusion of separation. Everything is energy. All existence is the same one energy. Imagine this. I don't want to erase my great work. Let's try this. Life is the dynamic play between those two elements that we love so much, order and chaos, light and darkness. Mathematically speaking, can you see that? Mathematically, life is the dynamic play between infinite energy and zero. Infinite energy is infinite everythingness, and zero is infinite nothingness. That's why when you multiply anything by zero, it's just a bigger zero. And they say you can't divide by zero, but they are wrong. They have lied to you your whole lives, my friend. You can, in fact, divide something by zero. You can divide infinity by zero, because infinity and zero are equal in value. So infinity goes into zero one time, and that oneness is called the universe, or the totality of existence. And so imagine this. You take that infinite energy vibrating at the rate of infinity or greater, who knows, and you slow it down all the way to zero. And like an accordion, if you imagine stretching it apart, all of existence, all of life is in between, with everything vibrating at its own unique frequency of existence. Everything that exists is the same one energy. The universe in truth looks a little something like this. Something like that. Just imagine those two pieces together, and this is called, there's a lot of names for it. You can call it God, you can call it Source, you can call it the All. It's just everything that is. It's the same one thing. I guess you could say everything is energy, and then some. Whatever that means. But, as human beings, as evolved monkeys, our brains have developed the capacity to produce higher and higher brainwave frequencies. Maybe I'll put up a chart or something, who knows. But you see, you can even imagine it. The faster the brainwave frequencies go, the more it looks like a singular beam. And that beam creates the illusion of separation. Our brainwave frequencies determine how we experience reality. It determines our level of consciousness. Here's one way to look at it. No. So we have, I'll try not to go on too much of a yapping theta. So these are the different states of consciousness which are determined by the vibration, the rate of the frequency of our brainwaves. So I like to say delta is no mind. Delta is the state of unconscious, deep sleep. There's no mind. Theta is the soul mind. It's the mind that exists in the dream state. Alpha I call the ego mind. Beta I call the intellect. And gamma you could say is the God mind. Now as you go deeper back into no mind, as the mind dissolves into nothingness, am I even on camera? As you slow down the brainwave frequencies, you return to unity. You know this to be true because as you go into meditation, as you go into sleep, everything kind of merges back into this milky oneness. But once you awake, there is a strong sense of separation. Just look around right now in your room or wherever you're at. Every object in the scene seems to be separate from you. That is how we experience reality. If you see the next person you see, you would say, okay, you are you and I am me and we are different. But the fact is, the scientific fact, is that we're all made up of the same star dust. What is stars? It's energy. When a supernova explodes its guts across the universe, that energy cools and the rate of frequency slows down. The frequency of existence, that is. And so it creates things like planets and people. We're all made up of the same stuff, but we perceive separation. And that separation is a consequence of our evolved minds. That's all it is. Brainwave frequencies. And therefore, we get stuck in the illusion of separation. That is the matrix. That is the source of all suffering. That was one of the first realizations in the Bible, in the story of Adam and Eve falling from the Garden of Eden. In the beginning, Adam and Eve were at one with God. They were in paradise. Union with God is heaven. But what did they do? They ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What is good and evil? Duality. So they fell from oneness to two-ness, and they were cursed forever to suffer. And all human beings since the beginning of time, everybody you know, and most people you will ever meet, are suffering from original sin. That is, they are trapped in the illusion of separation. You see, the only prison in existence, it's not the society, it's not the governments, it's not the world we live in. The only prison in existence is your own mind, and you are your own jailer. And that prison is made up of thoughts. Now, why this is so important, you will soon see. You see, your true nature is called consciousness. It's also synonymous with awareness. It's the divine essence of God. You call it the Atman. In psychological terms, it's called the self. You can also call it Christ consciousness. And this is the source of all bliss. And bliss, I like to say, is simply the combination of peace, love, and joy put together. It is also the source of all life. It's the source of existence. All things emerge from consciousness. Consciousness, simply put, is energy beyond the boundaries of space and time, meaning it is eternal and infinite in nature. Your true nature does not die. It is completely free from all experiences. Doesn't matter if it's good, doesn't matter if it's bad. The nature of the self, the nature of consciousness is freedom. And its fragrance is peace, love, and joy. There are a few different ways to come to this understanding. Most people will not be able to believe it because, guess what? They only know the ego. The ego is separation. And what is separation from peace, love, joy, abundance, freedom, slavery, lack, and scarcity? Not joy, not peace. And so we spend our whole lives seeking these things simply because we are trapped in the illusion of separation. We believe ourselves to be the ego, and to become awakened, to be enlightened, means to realize that you are not the ego, you are consciousness, you are the self. This is a very important realization. Perhaps the most important realization you will ever realize. Because suffering only exists so long as you are identified with the ego. To become enlightened, to become awakened, is synonymous with becoming free from suffering. You see, separation from God is hell, because the nature of God is all of these things. But think about this practically. Most people, you can even ask yourself your own definition of God. Would you say that God is omnipresent? That God is everywhere, always? I'll give you a moment to say yes or no. If the answer is yes, what this implies is that if God is everywhere, always, that means God is always with you. And that means that God can never be separated from you. Original sin is an illusion. God is always with you whether you realize it or not. It is simply our ignorance, the veil that covers our eyes, that prevents us from seeing this fact. Which means, as we discussed, you are already in heaven. You're only dreaming that you're not. That is why they call it an awakening, my friend. The reason I share this, or at least what it means in relation to this video, well, we assume that we have to struggle and try really hard to get to heaven. It's not true, my friend. It's only true so long as you are a slave to the ego. You see, this one who is experiencing the timelines is the ego. Where you are, it's like right here. In the eternal present moment, you are the unchanging for all eternity. Don't be afraid. Only the ego is afraid. Let's look at it this way. In reality, when you break reality down to the two fundamental elements, and you can try to disprove me with this in the comments if you'd like. Good luck to you, my friend. It cannot be done. There are only two things that exist. There are only ever two things that exist from the moment you are born until the moment you die. What are these two things, you may ask? There is an infinite array of changing experiences upon the backdrop of an unchanging awareness. When you are born, you experience being born, and you are there as the awareness. You grow up, your body changes, your mind changes, your awareness remains the same. Your body and your mind are changing experiences. When you go to sleep at night and you go to dream, yet again, another infinite array of changing experiences, and you still there as the awareness. And in deep sleep, another changing awareness, another changing experience. The only difference in deep sleep is that there is no mind, which means that there is no separation. To experience requires two things. It requires a subject, it requires an object to be experienced, and a subject to experience that object. When there is no mind, there is no object, and therefore there is only one, and so you experience the void. You are the unchanging awareness. That is the divine essence of God. That is consciousness. And everything in reality other than yourself is a changing experience. So you might even watch yourself hop from body to body in 1,000 different lifetimes, 1,000 different reincarnations. It does not matter. You remain as the eternal bliss, the kingdom of heaven, You are forever safe. This is why everything is perfectly okay. Because your true nature cannot be destroyed. It cannot be touched by any experience. It's eternally free. And life is God's great game of separating from itself so that it can rejoice in reuniting. In other words, God blasted itself into 1,000,000 different pieces so it can rejoice in the experience of coming back together. The point of all of this is because once you realize your true nature as the self, the fact that you're already here, you're already at your highest potential, all you have to do is eliminate the thing that is keeping you from your highest potential. Let's look at it this way. Life is not really about gaining anything. Life is a process of removal. Think about your soul for an instant. Think about it like a balloon. Your soul naturally wants to ascend back to heaven. It wants to return to its source. Naturally. You will reach your highest potential naturally, without even trying. Now, of course, it might take a lot of effort at first because we are in the grip of the ego. What is the ego? The ego is like this balloon, this soul, covered in mud, covered in earthliness. That earthliness is conditioning. The conditioning that we receive during this lifetime and perhaps many other lifetimes. And what does that conditioning do? Instead of going up naturally, we go down naturally. Our ego, our conditioning, all of these karmic attachments, they bring us lower and lower. That is why people who are evil, they say they go to hell. Because the more evil you are, the more stuck you are in ignorance, in unconsciousness. The more attachments you have, the more you're stuck in separation, in illusion. And so down, down, down you go. Then what happens is that the fires of hell burns away all of your conditioning. And then you rise back up again to give it another shot. Hell is not a place of eternal punishment. It is a rehabilitation center. And so we're kind of just playing all of this. And so we're kind of just playing this game. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Life, death, life, death. But as it is often said, once you get enlightenment, you break free from the cycle of suffering that they call samsara. Samsara is like a great desert in which all wander. All of the pools of water in this great desert are salt water. That whenever the poor souls drink from that water, they always become more thirsty than when they began. But as Jesus said, if you drink from the water that He gives you, you will never thirst again. What this means is that so long as you live from ego, you will continually chase temporary pleasure, desires, and you will always be running away from things. You will never find true satisfaction in this life, no matter what you do, because the true satisfaction comes from reconnecting to your true nature, from experiencing heaven, from being with God. And ego, by its very nature, is separation from that. So most people are always chasing their desires, but because this is an infinitely changing world, we suffer when we don't have what we want. Then we suffer to go and get what we want. And then because things change, when we get what we want, what we got goes away. It changes. We experience a temporary peace, temporary satisfaction when we finally get what we want, and then we need a new desire, forever on this hamster wheel. But instead of dealing with all that garbage, all we have to do is get rid of all this muck and dirt, and you will naturally rise to your highest potential. In other words, all that is required is that you find enlightenment. You find the true nature of what you are, and in order to find, you must first seek. And what will happen is this. Let's say you're in hell, right? Man, that sucks. See, naturally, without effort, you will rise to higher and higher timelines. But because of our attachments, because I'm sorry. But because of those attachments, we hold on and we don't want to let them go. And so we stay stuck. Now, if you want the goodies, this is what you need. Now, you will take your own journey, because you could say that the whole point we were born into this life is to learn karmic lessons. Like, we came into this life with all of this karma, what you imagine is like a bunch of knots. We're all knotted up. And we come into this life to become free. Our soul knows exactly what we need. All the suffering, all the problems, all the struggle is exactly what we need for our highest spiritual growth. And so each journey will be unique. But imagine this. Imagine before you were born, I was standing with you, and you were about to take the leap, return to this madhouse called Earth. And I said to you, look, you're going to have a lot of fun. But if things get rough, just remember you have a button in your back pocket that will set you free. The only problem is you will forget that you have this button, and you may never even find it. But good luck anyway. Here is that button. Quite simple. Let me ask you this. Does it take any effort at this moment to be aware? No, you are aware no matter what. Good experiences, bad experiences, rain or shine, you are aware. You are always the unchanging awareness behind all of your experiences. But what happens is, because we're stuck in the whole ego thing, we identify with our changing experiences. Our body is a changing experience, we say, I am the body. Our mind is a changing experience, we say, I am the mind. But if you can't observe a thing, something can be experienced. What does that mean? It means that thing cannot be you. If something is an object of your awareness, then you must be different than that object. You must be separate from that thing. So enlightenment, what basically happens is that, okay, for the first time, you realize that you are none of your changing experiences. You're not the body, you're not the mind, you're not your thoughts, you're not your personality, but that you are that unchanging awareness. Once you see, you can't unsee. And so what happens is that you rest in your true place as awareness. The only problem is you can't experience yourself as awareness because you are awareness. It's like in deep sleep, remember? Without an object, all you experience is a void. You cannot experience yourself directly, which makes it hard for people to grasp. The mind wants an object to grasp onto, but you are not an object, you are the subject. And so what happens is that, well, once you realize this, all of your karmic goodies come up for you to let go of. I mean, they're coming anyway, but what happens is that you kind of oscillate a bit. Once you become aware of the truth, let's say you become aware of the truth, and then some experience triggers you, some attachment, and you get frustrated and you feel suffering and you have no peace. And you're like, well, what's going on? I thought I was awakened now. And then the attachment comes, and then you return to your true place as awareness, and then peace, freedom. And then you go along and you get triggered again, and then you suffer, and then you return to peace, and you get triggered again, less and less and less and less. A common example is that when you turn the power off to a fan, the fan keeps going for a while until it completely stops. Once you see through the illusion of the ego, you cut off the power. But what happens is that the ego has some energetic momentum, so it pulls you back into it. It grips you again, and you return to ignorance. And so every single time you get triggered, regardless if you're enlightened or whatever, every time you get triggered, observe that feeling. Observe your thoughts. Observe your experiences, because in your observation alone, you create non-attachment. Because whatever you observe automatically creates separation from you. That is how you remove all the garbage that is keeping you stuck in these lower timelines. It's non-attachment. Awareness is already free. You're already in heaven. It's simply a process of removal. Everything else takes care of itself. The reason that we suffer so much, for instance, if you have a negative thought, you identify with your thought, and you and the thought become one. And because the thought is negative, you get attached to the thought and it rubs its negativity all over you. And so you suffer, and you get dragged all over the place by your thoughts. Or you identify with your emotions. I am so upset right now. And so your emotions drag you along and do whatever they want to you. Think about the difference. When you observe an emotion, let's say you observe the anger, you don't identify with the anger, you say, there is anger. When you can remain as awareness, if you can practice observing your experiences and seeing through the illusion of the ego by recognizing your true place as awareness, you stop taking life so personally. You stop getting dragged all over the place by your thoughts and your emotions. You don't get triggered anymore. And what happens is that, for instance, something in your old life that used to trigger you no longer triggers you, and it loses its energetic momentum and it fades away. Because remember, energy is the force of creation and it's the force of life. Nothing can survive without the life that you provide. So for instance, if you're struggling with negative thoughts, the only reason that they're there is because you have been unintentionally feeding them your energy. You've been giving them your life. Same thing with an addiction. When you feed an addiction, you give it your life force and you lose power. Because energy is life and power and creation. And so, as you may have experienced with negative thoughts or with addictions, when you feed them, you feel helpless because they have taken your power, they have taken your life. They become stronger and you become weaker. And so you enter into this slave tyrant dynamic, these negative things. The way to be free from them is simply to stop identifying with them, to observe them with detachment. This is how you neutralize every single negative experience in your life. And over time, they lose power, and they lose power because you have cut off the food source. You have stopped the fuel, that fuel which was your energy. You have stopped putting gasoline on the fire. And so the fire begins to die out over time. Automatically, what this means is that you begin dropping away your attachments. And naturally, you begin rising to higher and higher timelines. And every once in a while, an attachment will come back, and you might temporarily go back down. And that is not a problem, because life is all about fun. Life is a roller coaster. You can't have up without having down. It's the contrast that makes life meaningful. So if you make a mistake, if you experience a problem, a difficult situation, remember, you get to see the negative, or you get to see the good, or you can remain non-attached and neutralize the negative experience. You either neutralize the negativity or you transmute the negativity into positivity. That is called being an alchemist. And in that, no negative thing in your life can destroy you ever again, because you will use all challenges, all problems, all difficulties to strengthen you. You will always come out on top, and you will forever be in a perpetual cycle, an upward trajectory, and your life will continue to get better and better and better and better and better for all eternity. But what happens is, if you let this run your life, you can stay stuck, you can stay down in the hellish realities, and no matter how hard you try, you're trying so hard to make life better, no, not gonna happen. Because the ego cannot help you. You might be able to play around in this midsection. You might even be able to make a good life for yourself. But it is very difficult to reach your highest potential so long as you are a slave to the ego. Now, the ego is not a bad thing. It's a tool. It's a tool that is used for separation. Separation gives us the sense of free will. It allows us to control our attention. What is bad is being under the illusion of believing that you are your ego, that you identify with the body-mind complex, and you are not aware of your true nature as awareness, as consciousness, as the self, as the divine essence of God. Why this is so important is because as you begin letting go of these attachments and remaining in your true place as awareness, naturally, without any effort on your own, you will rise, you will experience more peace, more love, more joy. But this requires a few things. The ego's whole game is power and control. Everything in its reality is nothing but to reinforce its own sense of self. And so, but the nature of awareness, as I said before, whether you're good or bad experiences, awareness is 100% unconditional acceptance of all experiences. The ego, because of its desires and aversions, cannot accept reality as it is. It needs to get things. It needs to force reality to be the way it wants it to be. Awareness is complete acceptance. In other words, you realize that God's creation is perfect and that everything is exactly how it needs to be, that you are perfectly okay. This requires faith and trust. Trust that life is taking care of you, because life does take care of life. God is always with you. God is always guiding you every moment of your life. Whether you see it or not will be determined how much you are living in ignorance. And perhaps most importantly, this requires surrender. You surrender completely to the present moment, because life can only be experienced in the present moment. So the more separated from the moment you are, the less you are truly living. The ego always takes you out of the present moment by judging your experiences and by thinking about the past and the future. The present moment is the gateway to paradise. The inner riches that await you. If you had a treasure map, the X that marks the spot is right underneath your feet. So the only place you need to look to find it is the present moment. If you simply remain in the present moment and surrender, a great deal of all of your suffering will work itself on its own. There is no true suffering in the present moment. Only when the mind, only when the ego pulls us out of the present moment do we experience resistance. When we are present, we are in complete flow with the harmony of life. That is why the ego is the source of all suffering. It's the source of all problems. Because that heavenly experience that we talked about, the path to the kingdom of heaven, is in the present moment. And when the ego separates you from the present moment through its mind garbage, you suffer. And so you know, whenever you experience suffering, which is resistance to life, you have been pulled out of the present moment. And that is an indication to return. Think about the mind as a resistance valve. You have source, infinite bliss, infinite abundance, the kingdom of heaven. And our mind is like a valve that either closes or opens up the floodgates. The stronger your mind is, the stronger your ego, the more constricted, the more separated you are from source, the more you will suffer. That is why enlightenment, when you stop identifying as the ego, you stop feeding it, the ego begins losing all of its power. It begins dissolving. The resistance valve begins opening up and opening up. And so, as I experience it in my life, because this source is the source of harmony itself, all the problems that I experience in my life work themselves out without a single lifting of my finger. Not because I am special, but because I stopped getting in my own way. You let life, you let God do its job. When you reach this state, you enter into a state of non-doership, because the ego is, of course, what thinks it's doing things all the time. Instead, Because the path of least resistance, will lead you to enlightenment, surrender, trust, acceptance. And what happens, the same thing with Jesus. Jesus was a perfect vessel. Jesus was an empty vessel in which the Christ that is in all of us could shine forth. Like the quote, like the movie, the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. Jesus was a perfect vessel because he was empty. He was empty of selfishness. And when you're empty of selfishness, you're empty of ego, complete non-resistance. So God can effortlessly work through you, and you bring forth heaven on earth. But think about the difference between most people. If you had 2 vases or 2 jugs, one made out of clay, a broken pot with dirt and sand and all kinds of garbage inside, and the other a perfect golden vase, pristine. This one is like Jesus. This one is like a normal person with ego. When the water of God pours in for the ego person, the water gets polluted. It's not as useful. When the water goes into a vessel like Jesus, it's pure, it's perfect, it can be used. It's nourishing. Enlightenment, in a sense, is simply remaining in this present moment completely empty. Think about it. Try it out right now. If you were to just focus on your breath for a few seconds. Now focus on the space in between each breath. There's a space between the in-breath and a space between the out-breath. But if you pay close attention, my friend, you will realize that the space is underneath all breaths. It is simply the absence of breath that reveals the space that is always there. Just the same, there is a vast ocean of silence around you at all times that we rarely pay attention to. Only when you go out into the forest, only when there is an absence of noise pollution, can you truly hear the silence that is always present. Silence is the radiance of space. And peace and quiet go together. Which means that right now there's an everlasting peace within you, hidden within that space that you can experience, that inner spaciousness that could only be experienced in the present moment. Be here now. No mind stuff. You see, often we only experience peace temporarily when the noise of our mind ceases. But the peace, like the silence, is always there. Shine your awareness onto your body and find the inner spaciousness. If for a moment you focus on the space around you, we can intuitively experience it. You can feel the space. You know that it is space. And then you take your awareness out from the external world and you bring it in your body. You will find that the outer space and the inner space are one. Both spaces are only separated by the barrier of your skin. So, and in this inner spaciousness is a presence. And that presence is the natural radiance of consciousness, of your true nature. If you were the sun, this presence is the light and the warmth. And once you find it, once you find the presence, once you find the inner spaciousness, rest in this state. Stay here, be empty, remain in the present moment. And as you go deeper, you will connect to the natural peace. Already wrote that. The natural joy, the natural love, the natural abundance that is your true nature. Instead of going out into the world and trying to find all these things, be here now and realize everything you could have ever desired is already yours. I am Ray. Much peace and many blessings, my friend. And check out my store for goodies in the description. Much peace and many blessings. And remember, just be.